Welcome back to Union Voices, our Model European Union podcast. I am your host, Tabea, and in this episode, I will be speaking to Dr. Ana Polak Petrič, who is the Ambassador of Slovenia to Germany at the moment. Before that, she was also Ambassador in Japan, and she studied law. She holds a PhD in law and is an assistant professor for law as well. And thank you so much for agreeing to being on our podcast and to speaking about a very interesting and very important topic that we picked for today, which is women in diplomacy, their challenges, and then, if the time allows, we will also talk about global crisis and how to navigate them. So again, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you very much, Tabea, for your kind words and for the invitation. I'm very happy to do this with you. I'm always very happy to address also young people. So really, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. And then let us maybe start with yourself. Maybe introduce yourself a bit more. What do you do in your work as a diplomat, as an ambassador? How did you even decide on that career? What made you so interested in diplomacy and politics?
Well, it's always difficult to speak about yourself. I guess it's sort of, we don't have a lot of time for self-reflection many times, but I think that if sort of I wrap up my career, I have studied law, as you said, and during my time at the university, I very soon realized that I was not very interested in domestic law, be it criminal law, civil law. I mean, I passed all the exams quite well, but I was never really passionate about this. And then in my third year of law studies, there was much more of international law, human rights law, law of international organizations, minorities' rights, and so on. And through that year, I realized that this is something which I'm interested in, that I would like to understand better how states interact among each other, what are their obligations, what is the role, or let's say the position of an individual in this global world order. And then I started pursuing this career. So sort of my education is a mix of international law and international relations. I realized soon that only a lawyer is not enough to understand the dynamics of international order. So that's why I pursued my education at the Diplomatic Academy in Vienna, which was an excellent experience. And and why I decided for this, it's difficult to say that it was only one factor, but I remember very vividly, and I spoke about this on some other occasions as well. I remember when we were children, or I was still in elementary school, the war in Yugoslavia started. So this was a very dramatic or very sad tragedy for the country where I was born. I was born still in Yugoslavia in 1978. And then in elementary school, every single evening when we were watching TV with my family, you could see the atrocities which were happening there. It was one of those first wars where people could see almost everything, from the genocide to people being killed on a market in Sarajevo, waiting for food and water and so on. There were also a huge influx of refugees who came from Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina to Slovenia in 1990s, the beginning of 1990s. So they were, of course, my school friends, and we lived in this area. And I think this war and this experience have shaped me a lot. I think during that time, I thought this was something totally unacceptable happening to the people which we lived together in one state. We were friends. of course, many people had families there and so on and so forth. So this is sort of what shaped me, that I try to do something in my life where I could contribute, let's say contribute to shaping diplomacy or shaping international law, which would go in the direction of protection of human dignity. So I do not understand sovereignty of a state only as rights of the state, which some countries try to explain. But I think that the international law and the life of states have developed in a direction where states, of course, have obligations as sovereigns to their own people and to their own citizens. And this is something which sort of is my leitmotif, if you want, in my work and also as international lawyer.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And yeah, I am very happy that I am of a generation where for the longest time we did not have a war close by. So this is something I will probably never be able to fully understand myself, but I'm sure that this is something that will shape one as a human being, having to experience that so close by. So we went into detail about why this interest in diplomacy. Then maybe during your diplomatic career, maybe also before that, what were some highlights or key moments that made you see that, yes, this is really what I want to be doing, and I chose the right career for me?
Well, I think that maybe I explained this already a little bit in this first discussion which we had. I find that this sort of realization of let's say how human rights can be very much affected, or how people's rights can be easily forgotten in situations of war or instability, if you like it, is definitely something which is sort of the key moment in my career. And this is also why I then I started in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a legal expert. I was in the International Law Department when I started. Then I was the human dimension, human rights officer in our OSCE mission in Vienna for one mandate. And then when I returned back home, I was working for many years as a representative of the Slovenian government for the succession issues, which is something which also relates to Yugoslavia. It is actually, you know, it's a part of the law, of international law, which tries to settle issues, open issues, which remain when a state disintegrates, or when there is a unification, when there is secession, and so on and so forth. And there were many issues which are also, of course, there are interstate issues like borders, archives, cultural heritage, assets, obligations, financial obligations, debts, and so on. But also there are individuals there, meaning pension, citizenship, foreign currency savers, and so on. So this is the issues which I dealt then for quite a long time. It was almost 8 years. I was dealing with this as a legal expert. I had a wonderful team of people who worked with me on this, and so maybe sort of this first part of my career, I was seen more as a lawyer, as an international lawyer, as an expert in our ministry. And then I decided I will again go abroad, because being a diplomat, of course, you cannot be a diplomat without a career outside of the ministry. Yeah. This is very important. And that's when I decided to go for the ambassadorialship, and I was successful in this. And so now it's a lot of mixed work. How should I say? It's being ambassador of a small country with a small team. You have to do almost everything. So I don't see myself anymore. Maybe that I don't have enough time to follow all these developments in international law, although I would love to. But there are other issues which are extremely important and so much fun to deal with, from economic collaboration, cultural events, organizing, political discussions, trying to raise awareness on different issues which Slovenia supports as its foreign policy. So it's sort of a mixture. I was never bored in my career, this I have to say. And I'm very happy and very lucky that I have chosen a job which I love and which I every day find rewarding in a sense.
That sounds very nice, and I think that is something we all aspire to be working in a job that we like so much and that is not boring one day. Since our main topic for today is women in diplomacy, maybe let's change to this topic. Were there any challenges that you as a woman faced in this career as a diplomat?
Mm-hmm. Well, first I have to say that I think I am lucky that I'm coming from a state, so Slovenia, where I think the situation of women, I will not say it's perfect because it's never perfect. There's still gender gaps. But I would say that my country and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is striving already for a long time to pursue the gender equality, to give women diplomats a chance. And I have to say that during this time, I never really felt, even coming as a young diplomat, I never felt that I don't have the opportunities, that I do not have a possibility to succeed. So this is not something which I felt, and I'm very honest about this. I became, for example, first-time ambassador in Tokyo, in Japan. I was 41 years old, and I think at that time I probably was the youngest woman in our system as ambassador. So I don't feel I was really deprived from possibilities in our ministry, and I think that we are continuing with this practice. Of course, I'm saying it's not perfect, it's never perfect, it's not 50-50, but I think that the options are there. Maybe one challenge, which I remember, of course, from Japan, from my time in Japan, in that country, which is a beautiful country. I have such fond memories of my time there, but it is a country where politics, diplomacy, economics on the high positions, it's mostly male dominance. So during my time in Japan, there were many meetings where there were, of course, my interlocutors were only men, and women were serving beautiful, excellent matcha tea. And these were sort of, let's say, occasions where I many times felt that I would be happy that more women would be sitting around the table. And I think among women, we tend to have different dynamics, let's say, in discussions and dialogue. So needless to say that, of course, also in Japan, I met wonderful and very successful women who were great role models. For example, the mayor of Tokyo, Mrs. Koike, or foreign minister, Ms. Kamikawa, many sportswomen, great sportswomen, journalists, and so on and so forth. But there were many times where I was the only woman sitting around the table. And of course, this is challenging.
Yes, I believe that. Have you, or do you feel like, you said that you feel like we're moving in the right direction and we are progressing in this area of women in diplomacy, women in high political charges. And you said that you felt that the opportunities were there for you as a young woman going into this career. I would say that maybe in Europe, we have we are very privileged to have this be more the norm rather than an exception, to have women going into these kinds of careers. Do you feel like, even though we are in this fortunate position, there are still structural barriers for women in diplomacy?
Yes, I agree with you that, of course, there are differences in societies around the world and also in perception, in cultures, how women are treated, what, let's say, what possibilities are given to women. And I agree with you that we live in this part of the world where we should be grateful for what we have. And of course, for what our mothers and grandmothers and our, let's say, women have fought for many, many years. And I think it's important that we keep this, and that we, of course, understand this is not something which is just there, but it's something we need to continue fighting for. I think, of course, there are still different structural barriers. Which, for example, I think one of the most important things is access to education. This is probably a crucial start for every girl. So if there's not equal opportunity for girls to study, to start going to school, then of course all that comes later, it's of course very much problematic, or let's say it's very difficult that then women would be later in their life equal parts of society. I also think that it's, of course, very important, and this is maybe one thing which I used to say this many times. It's one of the very positive remains, or let's say legacies, from the socialist Yugoslavia, where most of the women worked. So I remember in my childhood, I don't even know one family where a woman would not work. So all mothers were working, all mothers had incomes, all mothers were more or less financially independent. So I think this sort of role model in families, that women are strong, they can be independent, they have their own will. Of course, this is very important. Specifically in diplomacy, a big problem is that, of course, women are also mothers. I mean, or let's say most of them are mothers, not all. It doesn't matter. Or they have families, or they have obligations also at home. And diplomacy is not a really nice profession to coordinate all of this. So there's many evening obligations. There's many obligations during the weekends. There's constant availability. When you have visits of high representatives, you need to be there 3-4 days constantly present. So also it's difficult to accommodate family life, in a sense that men are not very happy to go abroad and do nothing. They feel that they're not accomplishing what they should. So these are all the questions which ministries are trying to address, which also international organizations are trying to address, so that sort of diplomacy as a profession becomes more suitable also for working mothers. And I think this is one structural problem that probably needs to be addressed even more vigorously, and we need to try to find some solutions in these areas.
That does sound very, very plausible, and like something that should be addressed, and maybe even not only in the diplomatic world, but in general, the challenges that working mothers face. Speaking of going into diplomacy, do you have advice that you would give to young women specifically if they're interested in pursuing a career as a diplomat?
Well, first of all, I would say that my first advice would be to be professional. to work hard, and to try to be the best. I think that especially knowledge and studying and all the time trying to educate yourself. I think this is a very, very important asset which we should have. It doesn't, of course, go only for women. It goes also for men. I think the times which we are entering show that the times are not easy. So if I just make, let's say, one example of this, maybe it's not the best one, but let's say in the previous years, I'm not saying diplomacy was easy, but when there's not big, let's say, geostrategical rivalries and changes, of course, the life of diplomats was easy. When there's more dialogue, when there's more mutual understanding, of course, our work is, let's say, easier to pursue and easier to get successes. In this time where we see that probably we are entering a time of trade wars, a time of changes of alliances, shifts of alliances, of course, knowledge is going to be, again, a very, very important asset for good diplomats. And I would say that this is my first, let's say, advice, to really be professional and to work hard. And also my advice is to do a job as a woman. Many times I see that we try to, let's say, appear or like to get on us male characteristics as bosses or as diplomats and so on. And I think this is not necessary. We should stick to doing the job how we do it. And this means maybe showing more empathy, maybe trying to get a positive atmosphere in teamwork. I think women are good in this. Maybe trying to use different priorities. I see that a lot of women ambassadors around me and also myself, of course, for me, it's very important to raise awareness about gender equality, about women's rights, children's rights. So I think we should do our job as women and not be afraid of this, or even not try to imitate men when we do our job.
Right. Because we have a lot of men doing that job already, so why would we try to do exactly that?
One question which, of course, always comes to my mind when we speak about women in world politics and diplomacy and so on, I always question myself, and I don't have an answer to this. So maybe the viewers and during our discussions, maybe you will address this. Whether world would be a more peaceful place if there would be more women leaders and more women at the highest positions in different organizations. There's still not enough there to really address this. But I really hope that this would be an outcome of this whole process, of this whole revolution, let's say, in diplomacy in the last few decades, where, of course, diplomacy was a male's world. So if you look 100 years back, there was no women in any position, in any diplomatic position. So this is, of course, I would say, a great change which has happened in the last decades, also in diplomatic profession.
Yeah. We have talked about what it needs to be a diplomat, what skills and what knowledge one needs. Maybe let's also talk about the structural side again. How could institutions, how could, let's call it society as a whole, encourage women more to go for leadership positions, to go for higher positions?
Well, we spoke about this already a little bit, so I don't want to repeat what I already said about education, about financial independence, about this family, let's say family-friendly working environments and so on. But I think what's very important, and I think at least in Europe, I would say that probably we are going in the positive direction. I think is this acceptance of women in high positions. I think there's many men and also women who don't even find a difference anymore, whether you're working with women, men, whether your boss is a woman, whether your boss is a man. And I think this is what we want to achieve. It's that, the best people get the jobs, not because he's a man or she's a woman, and that women have equal opportunities, and that nobody actually makes this difference anymore. And I think we're getting there. I think many times I don't even notice this anymore, who's sitting around the table, and I think this is totally right. I think in our job, we have to, of course, the first and the most important thing is how we do our job, not whether you're male or female. And I think, maybe just some numbers, because I didn't have time to mention them maybe before, but we are on the right track, absolutely, let's say, to fill this gender gap, but of course there's still a lot to be done. So here I have read that politics still remains the sector with the largest gender gap. So worldwide there is only 1/5 of government ministers and only 1/4 of parliamentarians who are women. So although of course there is huge progress if we look decades before, but of course there's still things that need to be done. Also, for example, in our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which I found, I think we are really doing a great job. We also have the first female foreign minister since the last elections. And this is, of course, a great role model for all of the female diplomats who are working in our ministry. But let's say in our foreign service, so abroad, we have 58% of women. So 58% of female diplomats who are serving abroad. And when you look at the ambassador, so the highest position abroad, this changes. We have 55% women and 65% men. So that means that although we have many more women who work in our foreign service, of course, then the highest positions are, especially abroad, they are taken by men. So there's still things that need to be done, but I think it's very important that we respect each other as professionals and that we work with each other, who, male, female, as professionals, as those who, of course, the same qualifications are required from the both genders.
Yeah, I think that is a beautiful way to put it, to say that the normalization of seeing women in higher positions is something that we need to make this happen, to actually not differentiate anymore. Maybe let's have one last question, since we didn't get to this part about global crisis. Maybe weave that into it a little. Do you think that women specifically, and you have mentioned that maybe a little bit already, that women tend to do things differently from men. Do you think that women would have a different approach to tackling global crisis?
Maybe not necessarily women. It's difficult, of course, to speak about this sort of in a bit stereotypes, right? Because of course we are all different among ourselves, and it's difficult to generalize this. But maybe on this question, I would say that diplomacy itself has changed also dramatically. Not only who's doing it, but also what diplomacy means. So from this strictly hard security perception of interstate relations, let's say, we have come to an era which, of course, diplomacy is much more, and also security is much more. So today we deal with cultural diplomacy, economic diplomacy, scientific diplomacy, sports diplomacy, if you want it. So there are all different aspects of how we, first, how we promote, how we introduce our country, how we pursue our interests. There are, of course, different ways how states interact among each other. So the diplomacy has also itself become, let's say, a different profession than it was decades ago. So, and I think that in this transition, women are excellent assets to this, because I think we tend to have a feeling for, let's say, more soft topics. That doesn't mean that we do not understand what hard security means, what defense means, that we do not understand the necessity of all of this. But I think we also understand that people's to people's relations can be fostered through many other ways. And I would say that in this time of changes in diplomatic world, of course, women can play a very important role. Of course, there's many discussions nowadays whether we are entering the world of only realpolitik, whether we are entering the world where only the power is going to speak and the most powerful countries are going to shape the world. Of course, there are negative trends. This is quite clear. I remember I had a lecture at the Hiroshima University in just a few months after, in 2022, just a few months after the aggression of Russia on Ukraine. And people started asking me, you know, what does this mean for diplomacy? What does this mean for you as a diplomat? And so on and so forth. And I remember that at that time when this aggression happened, my initial response was, or my initial inner feeling was that I was so disappointed. I was so disappointed because something which I so strongly believed in has fallen apart. I have strongly believed that my generation is not going to experience anything like this anymore. I have thought that international law and the awareness of states have come so far that we understand that through some kind of imperialistic aggressions, this is not how states interact anymore. So it was a bit of an illusion, I have to say. And I think this is also important for the young people to understand that something which you believe, which you have been raised with, doesn't mean that it will stay for the rest of your life. So this was my biggest grievance, let's say, at that point of time, because my understanding of also my role as a diplomat has changed enormously. And also, of course, what we see today in Europe, understanding that we need to, of course, raise our defense spendings, that we are speaking about clear possibilities of needing to defend ourselves, our homes, our people. This is, of course, something which I would never think of 20 years ago. Times did change, and I think young people need to be those who are entering diplomacy. You have also mentioned this in the beginning, that you were privileged, that you never experienced war, and that you do not have this experience as I have. But of course, we all need to work for peace, and we need to do our best that we still believe in democracy, that we still believe in diplomacy. And I will here cite my minister, because this is something which is so right. She says, you know, especially small states cannot accept that the power of rules would be replaced with the rules of power. Maybe this is sort of my final thought on this question which you asked me.
I think that is also a very good way to end this with the takeaway that even though we have reached a lot and we are moving in the right direction, it is paramount that we never stop reaching for that and stop defending that what we have already reached, and to be clear always that it can be taken away, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen. So
yeah, I think that it's in these days it's difficult to be very positive, or let's say very optimistic in diplomatic work. But I think we should not sort of accept these emotions. I think it is exactly very skilled, very professional, very persuasive diplomats, and diplomats who believe in the values which we fought for centuries. I mean, I think it's so important that we understand that respect for human rights, for human dignity, international courts, accountability for heinous international crimes. This is something which sort of humans have worked for centuries. And the state where we are, of course, we should really fight for it. And skilled and very determined diplomats are something what we actually need. So I really encourage your listeners, maybe people who decide to go into this profession, that they're needed. They're needed.
Okay. Thank you for that, and thank you also for this encouragement of going into this career. Thank you again for your time and your insights, and I hope you will have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you.